is America, and this is Washington, D.C., where the National Guard is patrolling the streets on the president's orders. But reducing crime isn't Donald Trump's only vision for the Capitol, as he seeks to make D.C. beautiful again by reshaping monuments and landmarks. I'll have more on that shortly. But first, it's over to Neve Barker in our Washington studio.
Thank you, Tanya. Well, ahead of America's 250th anniversary, President Donald Trump issued sweeping demands to scrub the Capitol clean, not just deploying thousands of armed National Guard troops to patrol the Capitol, but systematically purging historical landmarks of what the White House calls ideological indoctrination. It's a massive top-down campaign to stamp a specific brand of raw power onto the nation's most visible stage.
I'm announcing a historic action to rescue our nation's capital from crime, bloodshed, bedlam, and squalor, and worse. This is Liberation Day in D.C., and we're going to take our capital back. We're taking it back. Under the authorities vested in me as the President of the United States, I'm officially invoking Section 740 of the District of Columbia Home Rule Act. You know what that is? And placing the D.C. Metropolitan Police Department under direct federal control. In addition, I'm deploying the National Guard to help reestablish law, order, and public safety in Washington, D.C.
Trump's federal takeover of the police in the nation's capital, the first of 800 National Guard troops now arriving today.
President Trump declaring a public safety emergency, saying he's activated 800 National Guard members in the nation's capital and has now placed the D.C. Police Department under federal control.
In just a few hours, members of the D.C. National Guard will once again hit the streets, much like they did last night, but with an even larger presence.
Well, all this raises some very big questions. Is Trump's intervention a way of rescuing the Capitol from, as the president says, crime and decay? Or is it simply an attempt to make the local Democratic leadership look bad? Here's Tanya Nuri.
Since returning to the Oval Office, President Donald Trump has launched an ambitious effort to transform America's capital. His administration has deployed members of the National Guard to the streets of D.C., citing concerns over public safety, and initiated a sweeping makeover of some of the city's most recognizable landmarks to make it what he thinks is more beautiful. Trump's measures, though, have sparked debate. Supporters say it's long overdue, while critics perceive it as an unprecedented expansion of presidential power. President Trump campaigned on restoring law and order in the United States and has made Washington, D.C. a centerpiece of that effort. The White House declared what it described as a crime epidemic in the city, arguing that local leaders have lost control of public order and safety, with the administration pointing to crime data to justify federal intervention. In 2024, Washington recorded the nation's highest rates of vehicle theft and ranked 4th in homicides. While city officials insist crime has since declined from that level,
Going to take our capital back.
The commander-in-chief mobilized nearly 3,000 soldiers across the city. But whether the deployment is reducing crime remains a matter of debate. An analysis from the Niskanen Center found no measurable impact on violent crime, though researchers did note there was a 24% drop in opportunistic offenses. As for Trump, he asserts the deployment is already producing results.
D.C. is now a safe, you people know better than anybody, it's a safe, beautiful city. When I came here, it was an unsafe, unkempt, horrible city.
The administration's initiative in Washington, D.C. extends beyond public safety. Trump, a former real estate developer, has championed a series of renovations and restoration efforts across the Capitol, including the Lincoln Memorial Reflecting Pool, Meridian Hill Park, and a proposed Independence Arc dubbed Arc de Trump. Not every proposal has moved forward, though. Trump's attempt to rebrand the Kennedy Center as the Trump Kennedy Center faced immediate legal setbacks. One lawsuit by a Democratic lawmaker described the move as more reminiscent of authoritarian regimes than an American republic. A judge later blocked the plan. And the reflecting pool, which cost more than $14 million to resurface and paint American flag blue, has already been plagued by issues. Trump's vision for the nation's capital is also expected to face political resistance from the Democratic socialist Janice Louis George, who is poised to become Washington, D.C.'s new mayor. Louis George has condemned the deployment of the National Guard, promised to rid D.C. of immigration enforcement officers, and said she will stand up for D.C. autonomy and statehood. Despite the challenges, the White House says its work is far from finished. The administration is seeking billions of dollars to continue various projects across the city, contending that Washington should be a representation of the strength and prestige that the country stands for. The question remains if this reflects a shared national vision or simply Trump's vision of America.
All right, well, there you have it. That's the debate in question today. And to help us through it all, we're joined now by Mike Van Meter, a former D.C. police officer and FBI agent, and he's also a Republican congressional candidate for Virginia, and James Butler, a former candidate for the mayor of D.C. and a Democratic strategist. So it's really good to have you, Mike and James, with me here on This Is America. Starting with you, Mike, we have armed National Guard patrolling metro stations and tourist corridors. I've been here 2 weeks. It's quite an arresting sight to see men in camo walking along key monuments in the city. You've been a police officer, a federal agent. Surely there is a vast difference between tactical policing and putting an army on civilian street corners. Help us with this one.
Yeah, well, you got to remember now, and something that is kind of unique to the United States is Washington, D.C. is a federal enclave. It's federal property. It's not a state. And it's mentioned in the Constitution. And the viewpoint is that the number one priority of any elected official in the United States is the safety and security of the people in the United States. As you mentioned, I was a D.C. police officer back in the 1990s and then spent the next 20 plus years as an FBI agent. And I worked right here in Washington, D.C. Washington, D.C. is arguably one of the most dangerous cities on the planet, actually. When I was there in the mid-90s, it was. We had the highest homicide rate of any city on planet Earth. And by the way, it's not that big. It's not that big of an area. New York is much bigger. L.A. is sprawling, and it was very, very dangerous. And very, very strict gun control laws. But the interesting thing was, everybody in the world had a gun in Washington, D.C. at the time. And it's really embarrassing how the city has turned out when it was given, when you have the Home Rule Act, right? And so we have the Home Rule Act, it's turned over, you now have a city government that is completely inept. It is completely horribly run, and it's very unsafe. Okay. And anywhere in America, people know that. And so outside of the Washington, D.C. area, everybody's happy to see what's going on.
Okay, Mike, thanks so much for setting out your stall. Turning to you, James, because how do you see it? Is it genuine assistance or is it state-sponsored intimidation?
Let me be very clear and not equivocate. This is nothing more than egomaniacal, authoritarian overreach. In 1973, December 24th is the day that Congress put forward President Nixon, the DC's Home Rule Act, so DC could autonomously govern itself, subject to the approval of Congress, not the executive branch. So when this president talks about, oh, if we get Janice Louis George as mayor, we're going to see about taking over the government. That is the authoritarian overreach I'm talking about. Trump is hell-bent on putting his thumbprint on everything about D.C. He knows D.C. is predominantly Democrat, and he's going to punish the people in any way that he can, if that includes militarizing the streets. Now, we can talk about the National Guard coming in. The truth is, they've come. People can argue that crime is reduced, but when he deployed them in August 25th, 2025, crime was already trending down.
James, on that point, let's bring in some cold, hard data for you, because one of Trump's motivations for bringing the National Guard into the Capitol was to tackle what he called the out-of-control crime. The city, he said, was under siege. He called it a national disgrace and one of the most dangerous places in the world. So let's take a look at crime over time in D.C. This is data by the city's Metropolitan Police Department. The National Guard was stationed in the Capitol in August last year. First data on theft, which has been on the rise. and a noticeable downward trend after the arrival, which recently is starting to climb once more. Motor vehicle theft was already trending down before the Guard was deployed. Having the troops on the street has not had a real impact, though, on assault with a dangerous weapon. And similarly, for homicide numbers, there was no significant drop after they were stationed here on the streets of D.C. Mike, the White House insists the troop presence has crushed a potential crime wave here. I mean, it is true, looking at that data, to say that opportunistic crime, things like muggings, are significantly reduced by 24%. Nevertheless, sex abuse is up. Assault with a dangerous weapon, as we've just seen, is up. I mean, Mike, it costs $1.6 million a day for the National Guard to be here. That's $677 per soldier of taxpayers' money. Is it worth it?
Oh, would it be worth it to you to not be murdered on the street? Of course it's worth it.
The fact is, murder numbers have not changed.
Well, hold on.
Go ahead, Mike. I'll bring you in.
The question was to me.
I'll bring you in a James.
I don't interrupt. I won't interrupt. So it's absolutely worth it. And by the way, remember we were talking about how D.C. is a federal enclave. If you're arrested for drunken public, and I want to remind people, because I think most people in the United States don't understand what the relationship of Washington, D.C. is to the federal government. If you're arrested for drunken public or DUI, you appear in federal court, not state court, not county court, federal court. When I was a D.C. police officer, if I arrested you for having an open container, I filed your case in federal court. This is a federal city. That's what it is. The National Guard, D.C. has a National Guard, every state has a National Guard, and the president does have the ability to call up the National Guard for security reasons. It's done all over the United States.
My point being is that value for money, because by comparison, Met policing costs $384 per officer per day compared to the $607. I mean, as a former police officer yourself, I mean, how does that make you feel? How might it make your former colleagues down at the station think about all of that?
I'll tell you exactly how they feel about it. They love it. Because the fact is that when we've had a number of years now with defunding the police, which D.C. led the charge on, really crippling the police department. Recruiting is horrible. They cannot recruit enough police officers. They're not supported when the officers are out on the street, are not receiving the.
What about that National Guard money going to the police instead? I'm not talking about defunding.
You're getting into budget. It doesn't really work that way. Okay, you can't take federal money for the National Guard and give it to the D.C. Police Department. It does not work that way.
Understood. James, let's play devil's advocate, if we may, because crime is down overall in D.C., isn't it? Property theft was a massive headache for local businesses. Even if the Guard is, arguably an expensive tool, it seems to be working in some degree.
But these are for minor theft, petty theft. Homicides have virtually stayed the same and have trickled down a little bit in the direction that they were going in 2025. The reality is, I'm on the ground. I know folks from Anacostia to the Palisades. I can walk into any neighborhood and know someone. I see the Guards people and the Guards personnel. I talk with them. The reality is, I ask these young folks what they're doing, and they will tell you almost without exception, not very much, we're bored. They're not doing much. For $1.6 million a day, we can invest in DCs. If we're saying we need more police officers on the street, and God knows that's not the only way to bring down crime. But if that's what we're saying we need, we invest in metropolitan policing, we do it. But we don't need to militarize the Guards people to patrol a civilian population.
Understood. On that point, both of you clearly come from two different ecosystems on this. Let's try and hear from the good people of Washington, D.C., or at least people who are passing through the city, about what they think about all this.
It's just going to create more animosity versus community, and that's what, obviously, if we're trying to make things better, only making people feel more disconnected from the city.
Because of my basically conservative political stance, that I'm actually sometimes targeted. And when they're here, I'm not worried about that.
When it comes to the city, you have city crime, and as you looked at all the statistics, crime is really down. So it's really unnecessary.
Mixed opinions, like we have in the studio. Mike, back to you, because if we look at the cold data, it looks as if the crime numbers actually started to fall in 2024, before the National Guard were deployed here. I mean, local cops, didn't they have it under control?
You know what's interesting is, I don't know if you're aware of this, but the D.C. Police Department is under federal investigation for manipulating data. Okay. And so I've been in law enforcement for a very, very long time. And I can tell you, I'm very leery when I see data coming out of, when you ask a police department, when you ask the FBI, when you ask all these agencies to produce data on crime statistics, I'm very leery of that because of the fact that I've seen the manipulation. I saw it back when I worked there, and this is within the last year. In fact, there are a number of people that were fired from the D.C. Police Department.
What incentive would they have to want to fiddle the numbers
political incentive. When you're the chief of police, who do you work for? You work for the mayor. You're working for the city council. You're working for these people. And when you're at that level in any law enforcement agency, you are under political pressure to make data support political agendas. You yourself are not political, but you are. Okay. Your boss is.
All right, Mike, I hear what you're saying. Obviously, we cannot independently verify.
I saw it firsthand for many, many years.
We as a network obviously can't independently verify that, but we hear what you're saying. Before we move on, let's talk about what's being called the Trumpification of D.C., because while the debate, as you know, rages in the halls of power, the battle over the city's new aesthetic is playing out very differently online. For a look at how all of this is landing with the public, here's Alex Baird.
Well, to explain all of this, you really have to start up the top with the president himself. This is his personal scorecard for making D.C. safe and beautiful. His accomplishments: over 1,600 lights fixed, hundreds of park benches, dozens of rat-resistant trash cans, and some statues to boot. Trump is pretty happy.
And Washington, D.C. is now one of the safest, most beautiful cities anywhere in the United States of America.
And the president has been hammering home that point, that he found the nation's capital rampant with crime, and now it's safe. But then there's the other side, those who Trump labels radical left lunatics who are trying to ruin his vision. Like this. His $16 million revamp of the Lincoln Memorial reflecting pool now peeling and covered in algae. Trump's blaming that on sabotage, but on the other side, it's being seen by some as a metaphor for the administration. Ignoring the experts, overspends, declarations of victory, yet all of that ending in failure. What's clear online is the deep divide here, a constant back and forth online. Leftist vandals being blamed with destroying Trump's vision, while on the other side, pretty strong words against the president's decision to deploy the National Guard to stop further damage. Videos like this doing the rounds of the troops telling off kids, while protesters against the deployments are being labelled deranged, dressed up in their best Team Algae kit. Trump's mission to make DC safe and beautiful instead becoming a poster child for this nation's division.
Y'all trying to find something to arrest me for, yeah.
OK, well, we'll get into the reflecting pool in a minute. But, I mean, James, the administration simply wants to beautify the Capitol for this incredibly important anniversary, 250 years. I mean, it's only natural, isn't it? I mean, surely you give the Trump administration, give them the benefit of the doubt here, no?
They've done just the opposite of that. They claim they want to beautify it, but they've done just the opposite. And let me prove it to you. With the ballroom, they needed to seek congressional approval for it. The reality is they ignored the law, started the ballroom, have damaged the property of the White House grounds worse than we've ever seen it.
We've got better fountains, though.
Yeah, what's that?
You have better fountains.
Well,
though.
you know, we're going to get to those. But on the property of the White House, they've also set up a UFC fight and cage. What happens when they remove it? Damage more White House grounds than it's ever been in the history of this country. The second thing is, let's get to the reflecting pool. They take a perfectly fine reflecting pool that was literally perfectly fine. I run by it nearly every day, and they have a no-bid contract, and they redo it for $16 million, and it's done in a week. And they claim vandos, these nebulous vandos that no one can find, get engaged in criminal activity. This is emblematic of what you've seen throughout the Trump administration, to put his thumb on every single thing. On the Kennedy Center, again, violating the law. They were charged with taking the name down. What does he do? He takes the name down, but then puts tarp up in front of the Kennedy Center.
Mike,
I ask you, is that beautifying anything?
Okay, on that point, Mike, I mean, I think what James is trying to point out clearly is there's a difference between the beautification of a city and the branding of a city, which is why Trump's name arguably was taken down off the Lincoln Center. How do you see it?
Well, the Lincoln Center is another issue, and that was taken down, and you can argue that, fine, that's all you want. But when it comes to everything that you mentioned, what's wrong with beautifying the city? By the way, much of this was done with private donations, not federal money. It was private donations. This is our nation's capital. This is the most powerful city in the world right here. And we need to protect beauty. We need our friends from around the world, people like yourself, need to be able to come to this city, feel safe, because you have not felt safe in years past, coming up to this point. It was embarrassing, to see the streets of Washington, D.C. We used to have a motto in the police department, and that was, when the sun goes down, you go inside, because it is not safe for you to be outside.
But is it about public safety, or is it about sort of hyper-political paranoia? Because just to add to this story,
it's about safety, and it's about the beautification of the most powerful city in the world.
Okay, understood. But on that point, I mean, one of the men arrested at the reflecting pool was a 3-time US Olympian. He simply was cycling past to get some exercise.
Well, it's not exactly what he was doing.
He may have been approaching the reflecting pool itself and may have touched what he saw to be some floating pieces of the paintwork from the bottom. I mean, he was rushed by a National Guard. He was cuffed for 5 hours. I mean, I would argue that comes across as being somewhat heavy-handed.
How about this? I'm a law enforcement officer. How about we find out in court? So you and I are watching this from afar, and you're reading news reports, okay? How about he goes to court and we allow the people that arrest him, give their side of the story, okay? Because you're hearing part of the story. I can tell you one thing as a police officer. I've been a part of countless incidents in the newspapers and the media where I was physically there as a law enforcement officer and read the articles or saw the reports about it. And those reports reflected nothing about what I saw as an officer.
Understood. James, US media have been very quick to point out that more people have been arrested over the reflecting pool than the Epstein files.
Yes. It is time that, Trump frees D.C. and keeps his hands off of D.C. and release the files, quite frankly, since you brought it up. The reality is...
Well, let's stay on point, the beautification of the city around the anniversary.
And I know I've gotten a little tangential, but the reality is here that the Trump administration will lie about anything to save face. All of this administration has done is lied. One thing you can be assured of, anything coming out of this administration will be lies. And in fact, when you put the National Guard there, you were saying crime is... festering and out of control in D.C. Homelessness is festering and out of control in D.C. If homelessness was such an issue and you wanted to eviscerate homelessness and to eradicate homelessness, what you do is you take a $1.7 billion fund. Instead of giving that to violent insurrectionists, you'd give it to end homelessness with permanent and supportive housing for these homeless. Instead, you choose to give it to violent insurrectionists that sought to overthrow the Capitol and that assaulted police officers like Mr. Van Meter on that day.
Understood, James. Thanks for adding that. But let's bring us back to the key topic on point here. Mike, I know you're on the campaign trail right now.
I'm actually not running for office right now.
Okay. Well, thanks for the clarification. I mean, isn't this entire Trump-led DC initiative, I mean, is it just a convenient laboratory experiment? I'm taking the cynical approach, so hear me out here. Is it a way for the Republican Party to point at a city with a Democratic mayor and say, look at the chaos that these guys have left, only we can fix it?
No, that's not what that is. The number one priority of any elected official, I ran for office, you've run for office. My number one charge is the safety and security of the people that elected me to be there. Everything else is secondary and tertiary to that. Why in the world? To me, it's amazing we're even having this discussion. That is the number one priority. Anything that we can do to save lives here from violence, that is our responsibility. That was my number one responsibility when I was running for office. Can we be honest here? Anything that Trump does, the Democrats are going to oppose. If he said the sky was blue today...
But that's surely the job of opposition, as it is the mainstream media, to hold the powerful to account.
Absolutely, and there's nothing wrong with that. That's That's why we have great discussions. We're opposites, but we're going to be honest about it, right? You mentioned the Epstein files. I don't know. I seem to remember that Trump released the files. Did he not?
The issue is the number of arrests around the reflecting pool supersedes the number of people arrested around the Epstein files. And that is red rag to the bull, for the Democrats, surely. Right. You concede that.
Yeah.
James, look, I mean, are you missing a trick here? I mean, is the price for a safe and beautiful Washington simply giving up a bit of the city's autonomy? Is that a price worth paying? Quickly,
no,
if you
$1.6 million a day to have the Guard there. The Guard we're not getting our return on investment. This is nothing but an egomaniacal, authoritarian overreach by the president to stamp his name on everything in the district and take control over the district government because he knows they're 80-90+% Democrats.
Okay, look, it's been an absolute joy hearing your passionate argument here, Mike and James. What an absolute pleasure. Well, just to remind you, we've been joined by Mike Van Meter, a former DC police officer and FBI agent, and James Butler, a former candidate for the mayor of DC. Well, that's all from the team here in Washington. Handing back to Tanya and Al Jazeera's global headquarters in Doha. See you all soon. Bye-bye for now.
Wherever you are in the world, you can always watch the latest episode of This is America, Monday through Friday, 18:30 GMT. That's 2:30 p.m. Eastern if you are watching here in the U.S. From all of the team here in Washington, thanks for watching. It's bye for now.